Most people that start bonsai by propagation through seed or cutting or air layer make a crucial mistake that results in having no benefit from starting from seed or cutting. And although this is important for everything that you grow from seed or cutting or air layer, particularly for trees that you create deadwood on later on, like an elm or pine, an additional very important tip at the end of the video. Welcome, this is Jelle, growing bonsai. Let's dive into this. What do I mean? I went online and I asked the question, how do I grow a bonsai from seed or cutting? What do I do once they have sprouted or rooted? And quite frequently the answer was, for the first 3 to 5 years, don't do anything. Oh, next spring, put it in the ground and just wait. And once it is thick, you cut it back to the ground and then you grow it out again. These are valid methods, but they might not create the best bonsai. I am too late with these already. These are ginkgos. They germinated early this year. Look, the seed is still there. And I've not done anything with them. I've not root pruned, I have not wired. They've just been sitting in this pot growing out. I am therefore not taking advantage of the energy that seedlings have. They therefore aim at developing a long vertical root. This has been cutting propagated about 3 years ago. It's nice and healthy, it is growing strongly, yet I am not using it to my advantage. The same for this seedling grown black pine. This is now 2 years old and I'm making a mistake. Now I've grown hundreds if not thousands of plants from seed or cutting. And in the dozens of workshops that I've given, always there's one misconception that beginners have when they're starting bonsai. One of the main misconceptions is that you can grow something like this out very easily if you only had the material for cuttings. This is a mistake, and if you want a tree like this, it is going to take you a few decades to grow. That being said, it doesn't mean that you can't grow from cutting or seed. You have to enjoy the process. It will take years, if not decades, but then you can create really your own tree that you styled from start to finish. However, the starting part is probably where most beginners go wrong. To me, this is a very interesting bonsai. It has very nice, good foliage. This is a reason to grow from cuttings. Use this as a cutting and you grow a plant with a nice foliage. That is no concern at all. Next to this, I see a very nice trunk, and the trunk has deadwood and live veins. This is something that develops over time, and it is not something that you start off with. Then you go down and you look at the root base. Very nice nebari, a wide root spread, and actually the trunk has nice movement too. And now we are getting towards the point where a lot of people go wrong when they just start off growing from seed, cutting, or even air layer. Even air layer, you say? Yes. I prepare my air layers most of the time to have the same features as what I get from a seedling or cutting. Let's dive into this. What do I mean? The best bonsai require a little bit of work at the beginning of the growing out cycle. And whether you want to do it in the ground or in a pot, doesn't matter. If you take these steps in the first 1 to 2 years of a seedling or cuttings, of a seedling or a cutting's life, will create you better bonsai. Now, this is actually a little bit of a joke, because this is not going to be a big bonsai. I'm going to use this for grafting. So on purpose, I've not taken the steps that you need to take in the first 1 or 2 years of a cuttings or a seedling's life. If I take this one, however, you can see this is very different. It is a cutting of exactly the same age as the other one. What I've done from day one, I've been wiring this out. Yes, I wire my cuttings as soon as they have rooted. Well, as soon as they've rooted, here we go. This is a crab myrtle. And here I'm actually late in wiring it out. I prefer to wire my trees out as soon as they start growing. This was rooted in early spring. It now has a long whip, and this can now be wired out. The branches are still brittle. They've not hardened out, and therefore you have to be very gentle. But if you wire now, you can make very acute bends. This is not possible once it becomes woody, and therefore you can make a more interesting trunk if you wire out when young. The same for juniper. If you now look at this linden tree that I have here, you can see this was just grown out as a seedling in the ground. The lower trunk is now so thick that only with 5 or 6 millimeter of wire you can still bend it. And for me, that is too much pressure. The bark will get damaged, you'll get scars, and it might not even sit in place in a very tight bend. What we've now created is plants with a very, very short root base. I can even go in and remove some of these upper roots and just leave a lower set of roots. This I can now pot up in individual pots, and over the course of next year it will grow a very, very nice short compact root base rather than a very deep vertical one. You don't have to worry too much with young seedlings. Just make sure that the first 2 or 3 weeks you protect them from wind and sun, and you just put them in a shady yet warm place. It is now already fall, so it is actually quite late to do this. I would do this maybe 6 weeks after they germinate already. Then they have just 2-3 leaves. You clip it off then and they restore the root base very quickly. Now while I'm at it, I might as well just take a bit of wire and wire this up. Mind you, this has already hardened quite a bit because it has been growing for several weeks, actually months. These germinated in May and we're now in September. So I hope that it is still pliable enough to do this. So you can quite gently now make bends also in the lower part of the trunk and therefore create a more interesting bonsai on the long term. Now what I've done, of course, is left the wire too short because now I'm not actually wiring the lower part of the trunk. But you know, this is what I mean. This is what you're after. You get these very nice tight bends in there and your tree will look a lot more interesting later on once it's growing out. Let's pop this in a pot. Do the other ones. And now you know, take advantage of the health and the strength of seedlings, cuttings, but also in air layers. You can prepare an air layer by wiring out young branches, let that grow for a year or 2, get it set up as a little bonsai, and only then cut it off. And of course, this cutting, look at how well this has rooted. I can wire out as well. Can just take a little bit of wire. Do I still have something laying around? There we go. And very gently wrap the whole cutting with thin aluminium wire. Do this quite gently so there's not a lot of pressure on the branch. And you can now already shape the trunk in an interesting trunk line. And even if later on you decide to cut parts off, that's no problem, because the whole trunk will have an interesting trunk. You can never do this on a mature trunk or a mature branch. You see, now there's nice fluid motions in the trunk, and if I wanted to, I could make these very, very tight. This will quite happily now start growing again and become an interesting little young plant. Lazy bum telling people what they're doing wrong and not doing it right himself. Always 3D movement. 2D movement is boring. Just like that. Roots have been trimmed, lower trunk has been bent. And right, I was going to give you another tip, right? If you are growing out a juniper or a pine or any species that you are intending to give a gin, then it is important to remember one thing. The live vein, well actually the sap connection between this branch and the roots is always vertical. Except for one pomegranate species, pretty much all trees have a vertical connection and the sap never spirals. So if you want later on spiraling that wood, what do? You now twist and turn your young branches already. Let me show you. Let me see whether I still have some wire here. This is maybe a little thick, it is a little short. Let me get some decent wire. As normal, you take a wire, try to wire between the foliage and this other one as well. Let me get this nice and tight so I have a good anchoring as well. Right, so this is now wired out. It's a little long. There we go. So instead of just folding your branch, you want to rotate your branch. This way, now all the sap veins are rotated as well. They will keep this shape, and as the tree ages, it fattens, but with this movement already in the branches. And therefore, once you make that wood, the living stripes that you create are naturally rotating around the trunk. Then I do this for all branches that I have on my tree, so that I can also create interesting deadwood features. Because that's the second benefit of this method. If you just create a gin out of this, I was talking about a gin before. So if you have a shari on your trunk, this is now nice and spiraled. If you create a gin, you already have nice and spiraled deadwood veins as well. So as you start peeling the fibers out, they will rotate around the gin. So do this, create better trees. I would say I've said everything I wanted to say, except for do grow from seed, do grow from cuttings, take air layers. It's lots of fun, even though it is the slow route into growing a bonsai. But if you don't do it, you'll never have that tree that you created, start to finish, from a cutting. This will take another 2 decades. I'll be old and grey. Well, grey I'm already now. I'll be old, but by that time I'll have a nice tree from which I can say, you know, I grew that from a cutting. It's the process. Enjoy the process, trust the process, and know the process. And of course, there's going to be loads and loads of people who say, you just killed your seedlings. Sorry, but we are now in the middle of October. These have all done really, really well. This one's actually decided to pick up a little bit of substrate, roots coming out of the pot at the bottom. All of these are, of course, plenty alive. This was Jelle, growing bonsai. Keep doing that, and see you later.